What's going on, nerds? Thanks for clicking on the video. If you're new to the channel and you don't know what you just stumbled upon, you stumbled upon some knowledge. So I hope you stick around and let me hit you with it. That sounded a little sexual? Definitely wasn't. But now let's dive into today's video. The topics we're going to be addressing in this video are grip width, locked versus unlocked wrist, and also standard versus suicide grip, and how each of those have an impact on wrist strain, elbow flare, and the distance the bar actually has to travel. So without further ado, let's hop into topic number one. All right, topic number one, grip width. We're gonna start off with wide grip. Now, it's really common in powerlifting to see lifters grip the bar literally as wide as they possibly can so that they can shorten the range of motion as much as possible. As you see here, you'll notice the distance between the bar and my chest. Now, if we compare that to, let's say, a standard grip, you can definitely see the difference when you line these bad boys up side by side. So let's take that a step further and see what impact gripping super wide on the bar has on elbow flare. Now, this is going to depend on a couple of factors, one of those being the length of your humerus compared to the length of your actual forearm. If you didn't know, humerus is one, me, but two, it's also this bone in your upper arm. At what point are my elbows stopping? Are they passing through the bench, or are they stopping relatively even or high in comparison? And one of the goals of powerlifting is, again, that range of motion, so we're trying to keep the range of motion as short as possible, meaning we want our elbows to be as far away from touching the bench or coming in contact with that invisible line that's out there as we can. And for the most part with wide grip benchers, you're gonna see that the elbow flare, or like the actual angle of the elbow, is a little bit different than someone that benches close. So the greater degree of bend, in order to keep your joints stacked, you have to as your grip gets narrower and narrower. And the last little bit is wrist strain. Now, gripping wide can put a pretty big strain on your wrist. As you can see here, my wrist is actually cocked inward just a little bit. And this can cause some discomfort to a lot of people. So that's one of the things you kind of have to take into consideration when you're widening out your grip is, can your wrist handle that? And does your grip allow you to get into that position safely without causing harm to your body? All right, I think I pretty much covered everything with the wide grip, so let's move on to the close grip. So first things first, let's talk about the distance the bar travels the closer in we bring our hands. Well, I already showed you the demonstration between the wide grip and like a regular grip, but here's a wide grip versus a close grip. And you can tell right away, before I even move the bar, the distance that this bar is gonna travel is far greater the closer in that our grip becomes. And so for a majority of people, the closer grip is pretty much automatically out, just then kind of setting how wide they actually need to go. And if we take it a step further and look at the elbow flare, we can see that actually the elbows stay pretty tucked. Like, they're pretty close to the side on the way down. And this is nothing that I'm doing personally. This is the position the grip automatically puts me in. And if we see this, like I was saying earlier, the degree of flexion is super great in my arms, meaning my arm is bent to a much greater degree than in the wide grip, as we can see. And then lastly, we want to talk about wrist strain. And actually, that's the only benefit, or the only pro to gripping closer, is that the strain it puts on your wrist is relatively nothing, because you can maintain a locked, upright, nice wrist position with no flexion or extension in it whatsoever. So if you got some like janky wrists and they cause you a ton of pain, that might be something to take into consideration. Gripping closer could actually cause you a little bit less pain, put a little bit less strain on them wrist joints. And while we're taking a look at the wrist, the vertical line is one of your most important things. So you don't take away anything else. Just know that stacking your joints, keeping your wrist and your elbow in a line, that's one of the biggest keys. All right, so now that I've covered everything to do with grip width, let's get into these actual grips. So the standard grip is pretty simplistic, and I'm not talking about standards in like where you should grip on the bar. I'm talking about standards in how the bar is actually gripped. Okay, so the thumb goes around the bar, we grab the bar, and we're good to go. The one thing you will notice is my wrist is pulled into a neutral position before I unrack the bar, before I press, any of that stuff right there. My wrist is not cocked back, it is locked, and it is straight up and down, like I'm throwing a punch. And to me, this is highly important because, one, you look like a sissy little baby if you throw a punch like this, versus if you throw a punch like this, right? So when we're talking about power and stacking our joints, the straighter your wrist, the elbow, you get power, you look cool when you punch like Rocky. Now that we've got the standard grip out of the way, let's talk about the suicide grip. Now, for all my people that compete in the USAPL, the best federation in the world, bless up fam, you can't use this grip in competition, therefore you shouldn't train with it. But for those of you that compete in other organizations, this suicide grip has become pretty popular, and a lot of people like it because it gives the bar like a shelf to rest on. They feel like they can really kind of like put the power into it because it's like resting on the butt or the palm of their hand. So they're like Bruce Lee throwing these cool looking punches. But here's some cons to go along with that. One, wrist strain. Obviously this is going to put a great deal of strain on your wrist as you're extending the heck out of that wrist joint. So you gotta be careful, especially if you got them janky wrist joints. The other thing that it does is it takes away that stacked feature that I was just talking about. You know, where your wrist and your elbow are stacked. It now puts your wrist slightly behind your elbow and causes some weird torques. So this thing can cause a couple of issues, and overall it's just not very safe. I mean, there's always a risk for injury when you're lifting, but you want to minimize that. And that's why I just don't like to talk about the suicide grip, but I figured it was something that I should touch on because some people actually utilize it, which is crazy. I'm completely against suicide of any kind. So that's basically it for this video, but I do want to mention one thing before I leave. To help reduce wrist strain, you'll see a lot of people wear wrist wraps. Not straps, but wraps. Wrist wraps will greatly decrease the amount of strain that's on your wrist by providing some compression to combat the forces that are going on there. Anyways, that's it for this video. That's how the grip impacts the bench press. Thank you all so much for watching. If you click that thumbs up button, share this with a friend. Let's help everyone make some gains this year and really put an end to this thing we call poverty bench. All right, nerds, until next week, I'm out here.